And hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to the second ever Bull Rush with Shmulidorf, your host. We have Twolfman down below, not over to the right side. I'll change that just really quickly. Don't worry about that. We have Noirbot around here somewhere, and today we actually have Azaraki as a lovely guest host on our stream. Azaraki, say hello.
Hey everyone, nice to be here. I'm ready to talk about some patch stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Today's lovely set of topics is first going to be a big patch rundown, talking about our first impressions, our thoughts on the changes. That was an interesting way of saying that word. Our thoughts on the changes, as well as, of course, with Azaraki being here, a competitive perspective on everything. And eventually, if we get around to it, we'll start to talk about the future of competitive in Gigantic. Let's get started.
I would say briefly,
Yeah.
we have not mentioned why Azaraki is qualified to be an awesome person.
That is true.
He has a fantastic list of accomplishments. He's played for Synergy at PAX. So if you're watching the PAX Prime stream, what were you playing during the scrims?
I was playing Sven all three games.
Okay, yeah. So
Sven's my
if you saw
favorite.
the
Sounds about
wonderful
right.
Sven play in those just incredibly close games during the PAX Prime stream, that was him.
Yeah,
Of
Yeah,
course.
best Sven in A
of course, of course.
But,
and World, I guess.
Yeah, I
World.
guess. So
For
far,
now.
we'll see. That'll be something we could talk about later.
I beat Cheese Whiz in a Sven 1v1, so
I mean, that's worth something. That definitely is
Yeah,
worth
but-
something.
Yeah, but anyone can beat Cheese Whiz.
I mean,
Ooh, the trash talk starts early.
the trash talk starts super early, super salty.
So anyway, this patch, a lot has changed, a lot has come in, and it's kind of interesting to see where things could possibly be going. I want to start with these power orbs kind of situation. The match starts, and across the map, it just scattered little yellow glowing balls of energy, and you grab them, and you gain power. It's not really a lot of power, and it's not like they have like a respawn rate or anything, but it's really interesting to see like that's something that was brought in. What does everyone think about that?
I mean, personally, I like it. It adds a very interesting kind of dynamic to the game as to where, there's a couple of extra things to worry about, and it does help separate what I would say the newer players or the non-experienced players or even just the worst players from the better players, because there are going to be people who just don't know to pick up the orbs or just like, I don't have to worry about those. It's only, 2 power per kill that if I pick it up after I kill somebody, but that 2 power, is huge. That is incredibly, incredibly important. And, during the clash, it says power orbs will appear at empty summoning circles periodically. And that is really cool and really helps kind of get rid of that sense of the stalemate on this map that'll happen in Clash.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely an interesting setup. I mean, I think it's a move that is gonna. I don't think we really have a good idea of what's gonna happen with it in the long run. I like that they're experimenting in beta. I like that this is kind of a mechanic that we haven't seen before, and they're willing to pop it in during closed beta and just be like, hey, this might work, this might not. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm also finding is that it's not necessarily subtracting anything from the gameplay, and it doesn't feel as though any of the gameplay is inherently annoying or bad. It's just something that's added. It's there. It's like adding a new ingredient to a soup that's kind of already good and it's only spice. It's like, yeah, that adds a little bit of a spiciness, a little bit extra flavor, but it doesn't subtract from the overall original product, which is great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think the orbs at the beginning of the game are a little bit insubstantial. I see the main point of it. I think just looking at it was to prevent the beginning of the game from being both teams wait until someone gets a pick or something like that, and sometimes you just have both teams waiting until the entire first push happens. With the power orbs at the beginning, if there are a couple neutral ones near the center of the map, one team gets those, they're ahead in power, they're actually going to be able to force something to happen from the other team. So that's the general idea there. In practice, I don't think it really makes too big of a difference. But
Yeah, because
in
those
terms of
ones
the
only
ones
give
during
1
Clash,
power, I think. Yeah, they only give one power
There's
to
not a
start
lot
with.
of power whatsoever. The ones during Clash are pretty cool. I do like that idea. It still needs to be like worked around in terms of the pacing, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one thing I think they could probably do to fix that in the early stages at the very least is for almost all, with the exception of the ones that are in the center, keep them the exact same. But for the ones that spawn, the neutral ones that spawn in the center, make them those ones give a little bit extra power, and then also give them a little bit of experience for whoever grabs those as well. So kind of really giving that team who does go up and grab those that little extra boost they need to be able to make a play and start pressuring in on an actual objective rather than, oh, hey, look, we grabbed these, now let's all sit over at our Vista for 5 minutes while we wait for the first push.
Yeah, I also like the fact that it kind of gives something where it doesn't make it feel like a point is just completely lost if a creature is dead there. Like, during Clash, like if you lose that forward camp, chances are you never really go up there again unless your team is already behind the power generation and you're like trying to make a big play. It kind of promotes like, you know, a lot of teams could probably just like sit back, and if they have two creatures and the enemy team has none, like, that's already a whole bunch of passive power generation. They could just sit back and just wait for another push, because if the enemy team gets any closer, the guardian's going to destroy them, the creatures will destroy them, the players will destroy them. So I think it's kind of one of those good things that's supposed to be like an anti-snowballing mechanic, in some kind of general sense. In the beginning, I feel like those little tiny power orbs were supposed to, like, I thought about it as I was trying to go to sleep last night. I was like, these little power generation orbs, like maybe they're like promoting everyone going off and like actually
To the
splitting
different
off
points,
really,
yeah.
yeah, like splitting off really quickly and then getting those three summons as fast as possible to start that power generation.
And
Because
it really helps
yeah,
kind of like organize the newer players to be like, you actually should send people to these extra points and summon there. Because,
yeah,
if you play games with newer players, you'll notice a lot of people don't know where to go or what to do. And those little extra kind of trails of power orbs say, hey, look, go over here and now summon. Because there's a whole bunch of them here, and while you're here gathering these, you might as well summon. So it
yeah,
does kind of give it a little bit extra organization at the beginning of the game. And I haven't had too many games anymore where I was playing with people that didn't start summoning at all of the points. People see the power orbs and note, hey, look, we need to send someone here, and then up to there as well.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they start off initially existing. Like, it seems like in the early game, like there's, especially on Canyon, this might be something in other maps that will be more or less of a factor. But like in Canyon, like I haven't seen a lot of people not summoning points in Canyon, and it's like, especially early in the game, one or two extra power here and there isn't going to make a massive difference. In general, it seems just like everyone's going to claim all of the power orbs on their side of the map on each side, and
And then that's going to be that, pretty
we
much.
we just go like I can see like the value of how we power orbs like say spawn in the in like kind of the DMZ neutral zone in the middle of the map later, where it's like okay, maybe I like run around this cactus, grab a power orb, run back behind cover to break like a ceasefire area, but
Yeah, but
I
beyond
I don't
that,
know.
it really
At the
doesn't
beginning
add
of the
much.
game, it seems kind of pointless in the beginning of the game.
Yeah, but again, that goes back into the ideas of how they could add a little bit extra importance to those ones that spawn at the center, and a little bit extra experience grabs for the person who grabs them does help, because then now there's a real focus on wanting to grab them, because whoever gets those, there's a higher chance that they're going to get level 4 instead of just level 3 from the set of summons, and they'll be able to use that advantage in an upcoming fight that they can now engage upon, that they can now pressure for, because they have the upper hand and they know it. But at the same time, even then, without any significant amount of power increase, those starting orbs are really not going to do much, because I've noticed in games that I've played where I would grab, I played a game as Trip, and I grabbed all of the ones in the center before even heading over to our Vista, where we were summoning, and nothing happened at all. Nothing happened at all. Like, they engaged upon us, and it was an even match now, because they got an extra pick, or somebody got out of position, and that can happen. Those extra orbs in the center really don't make much of a difference.
It still ends up being who gets the first kill, basically, or the
Yeah.
first kill snowballs everything, obviously, but who gets the most kills. So I guess if it discourages both teams from just sitting there for the entire first push, but for the most part, that hasn't really been happening too much recently anyway.
Yeah, and even then, like, I think that's the inherent problem with it, is just saying, like, you know, the first kill is the most important part, and the power orbs, you know, summoning at the beginning of the map, I feel like was supposed to be the fix to that, was supposed to be something that deals with that, but it just didn't end up doing it at all.
I don't know. It's still something that really has to be developed. Kind of like, you know, these new creatures that we've gotten, the the Autumn Bloomer giving an invisibility power up that can spawn, and then this Yeti Cyclops that creates this frozen area that does damage and slow. Personally, I've really enjoyed the Yeti Cyclops. I've summoned him almost every single game in the cave, and he works. He is working it. He is laying down those fields, and he's throwing ice at people, and he's body slamming, and they cannot kill him. It's amazing. I think he's a great creature. Maybe a little bit powerful right now, but for the most part, he's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. Like, I've noticed games where people just don't know that they can change the creatures around and use these two new ones, but when it comes right down to it, I've not seen anywhere near as many Yeti Cyclopses as I've seen Bloomers. You know, the Autumn Bloomers, but again, that may just be because people like the Bloomers more with the new changes to creatures, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But for now, we'll get into the full details of that in a little bit. For now, we're going to go ahead and move to, you know, our lovely sets of kind of things we'll notice eventually if we're going to look at our lovely patch notes, saying that they've changed the amount of power your Guardian gets when you kill an enemy hero. Now it's a variable. 5 to 15 power, depending on the enemy's level, instead of a flat 8 power per kill, adding that kind of sense of counter snowball. Let's go ahead and say, hey, look, you've got a killing spree going on right now. You've got that going on right now. You now are worth more power. So if you die, if you make a big risk, you get 4 kills but die for it, you know, there is a chance that maybe you only got 6 power per kill and they got 15 for killing you. So your sacrifice to get that many kills is only quantified by they have less people on the map.
Yeah, but isn't it based on their level? Because if it's, I mean, it's one thing to get like a quadra kill and then die, but if you're all the same level, like they still got more power than you in the end. I mean,
Fair enough.
yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. It's like, you know, if there's like an enemy Taito that's like level 9 and like everyone's level 6, and you kill Taito, that's a lot of power. Like that's completely understandable. But, you know, if Taito kills 3 people, he's still got his own set of power for his own team. So it's kind of one of those things that it is a reward for killing someone that is more powerful. But, you know, when you risk having him get even more kills and more power from this new kill secure thing, if that's what we're going to be calling it, I feel like that's like a fan generated saying. But
Yeah.
if he gets those kills and gets the secures, like, I don't know, it's kind of the same similar trade-off. I feel like it could kind of be bad at the same time, but I don't know. That's just my opinion.
It can be, and I definitely could see it turning into a bad thing. And I've seen a couple of instances where that's, you know, where people have dived for the power but died going for that power, and eventually caused the enemy team to push because of that. But I feel like, you know, like we were saying before, the power orbs are just not a huge enough of an incentive to go ahead and just grab. Like, you know, say you're a ranged person, you're 1v1ing another ranged person, they die. You know, oh no, I'm missing out on 2 power if I don't go ahead and grab that really right away. Instead of, oh look, I'm dying now because I'm going to go grab that. Like, I don't care if I miss out on 2 power. I'm fine with living. Being totally honest, I'm fine with living. So,
Yeah.
you know, power orbs right now when it comes to just that kill secure, unless, you know, it's one of those things like there's no one around, that kill secure system doesn't really help much. But with that's why I like this whole change, the variable power upgrade. You know, the variable power grab on kills, because it does add that sense of snowball into the game that the power orbs, like we were saying before, doesn't really add, and kind of put something in that does, you know, have some quantifiability with it, rather than, oh, we added power orbs. Hey, look, we changed how power got generated, and it's massive. It is something that can change how people play the game.
I
Very
think the
true.
big thing with power ups that I would really like to see going forward is kind of have them build up over time. Because I think that's what could make it actually like a tiebreaker mechanic. Like if you have a power orb sitting in the middle of the map, it like starts off at 2 power, and then like every 10 seconds now it's 3 power, 4 power, 5 power, and eventually it gets up to the point where it's like if no one has collected that power orb for 2 or 3 minutes, it's actually a prize worth fighting over. And maybe
Yeah,
tiger because like now
That'll
that
be
that power
really
orbs
cool.
now that it's worth like 20 power, it's like even if I die for this, it's worth it. And then that will start fights inherently and force action because all of a sudden there's a prize worth fighting for. If you're just like it's 2 power and like someone dies and they give over 8, 9 power, it's like it's never worth committing for it.
That's a
and
really cool mechanic to
and
think
I can see
about.
that working, but I think it would work better if they changed how the mechanics of the ones that spawn on the empty points works. Make it so that, hey, look, this empty point has the power ball here, but right now as it is, anyone could just go and walk by and walk away. It's just like, let me go ahead and ninja this really quick because I can. Instead, make it so that you have to actually capture it, kind of like you're capturing the point. You know, you have to stand there and capture it. But do what you were saying. The longer it's not captured, the more power you get to it, between 12 to 20 or 24 even, double the amount of power you can get from this thing if it's been sitting there for like 3 minutes and no one's been able to grab it. Because that'll actually start fights. That'll start, fights in those places that do summon those and those camps that you've already lost, and get rid of that. Let's just wait. I don't need to do much of anything here. Let's just wait until the next push happens. Doesn't matter if we get it because they'll come in and we'll just kill all of them as they focus on killing our guardian. So again, going against that whole idea of killing the stalemate. Get rid of that stalemate on Canyon and get something worthwhile happening.
I think in terms of the amounts of power, there is definitely something to be said that there is a such thing as too anti-snowball or just not enough snowball, because then it sort of ends up feeling like what you did at the beginning of the game just doesn't really matter. Like you can get a level advantage, but you're ending up giving the enemy team too much of an advantage to come back into the game. So that's a delicate balance, and I think right now it's leaning towards a little bit too much of the anti-snowball because you're also seeing that the individuality, there you go, is hurting a little bit from that too, because if someone on your team is 2 levels ahead of someone else on your team, the impact that those two characters have are not too far apart, not far enough apart in my opinion. So that's something that also has to be taken account.
And that's a
To
fair
account.
point as well, because I've had that happen in a game last night. I was playing with a particularly good trip player, and we were losing most of the game. The enemy team was snowballing very well. We were at least 2 levels behind, at least after 3 pushes in Clash, and our trip decided that she was just going to spend most of her time trying to grab the enemy's power orb at intake the entire time. Just do that, grab ours, and now we've got all the power. We've got more passive power generation than they do, and it just completely washed out everything that the previous team was doing. And the worst part about it is she could do that. People like Trip, people like Taito, people like Wu, who have the ability to get in and get out, have that ability to just say, you know what? You may be a higher level. You may be playing better as a team. You may have all this going for you, but I'm just going to get this, get out, and that'll be that. You can kill me, but I just gained 24 power from my team by grabbing yours and grabbing my power orbs. So
Yeah,
even then, it doesn't matter.
yeah. I like the idea of what we've put in is just like have it be almost like an well, I mean it is kind of a neutral camp, but like have it be like one of those neutral camps that just grows in power over time and then
You have to
gives
actually
more.
capture it.
You actually
'Cause then-
have to spend time and capture it.
Yeah,
It's
because that'll
so much
actually
more worth it at that
facilitate,
point.
that actually I would say would help Snowball in a way, because now you have to actually sit there and capture it, and the snowballing team or the better playing team arguably would be able to stop that. Say, hey, look, I see you over there. Now we've all rotated and you're dead. And now we can get our power orb because you can't fight us because we have that advantage. But again, like Azaraki was saying, that it's a weird balance. It's a fine line to walk. It is very much a razor's edge between being too snowbally or too anti-snowball. So I think these would be things that could definitely be tested, internally. Motiga can test that out at their office and see what happens. And if they felt like, doing more consistent updates to the beta realm and actually make it a full-blown beta, they could go ahead and say, yeah, we're just going to push out, a patch a week, see how you guys like this. You don't like it? Okay. Yeah, and then we'll change it. But I just don't foresee that happening at this point in time. Going on a little bit further, there's some small bug changes we see, and some cool new animations and artwork in the games. Like the walls are no longer just flat blocks; they're actually modeled and look really nice. The Cyclopses will make. You'll see stars over your head when a hit reaction disables your abilities. Leap skills can't be immobilized midair. Some really nice, just quality of life changes, and
yeah,
I love that.
There's a lot of stuff like that. I think one of the other things that is a really subtle thing that we'll see exactly how helpful it's going to be, but there is an interesting add-in that is visual effects for Guardian shields to give you an idea of how strong it is. So I really like this. If it I haven't had a lot of experience visually seeing it and whether or not it's a helpful indicator, but I know
it is an incredibly helpful indicator. It is so helpful.
Because the Guardian shield can be a pretty big damage soak, and having an idea of being able to just, when you're in the Guardian's face, knowing how much shield it has is really helpful for just strategic decision making.
Well, and a great example is I was playing a few Mozo games last night, and I would be shooting at the shield, and I'd be doing maybe 100 damage over 2-3 seconds, and then as soon as that shield went away, I'd be doing my regular full damage, and I'm like, okay, so let me attack this normally, let's set it afar and attack it normally, and then as soon as I see that shield go down, I'm going to teleport and gain my 25% increased damage, my full charge from the start, level, left mouse button shots, and do 1,300 damage to this thing in a full set, because now I can know that my full damage is going out. And I think a lot of people are seeing that. People aren't going to be, as Trip players or Taito players, aren't going to be going hard to engage on a shield or on a Guardian unless the shield's gone. Or maybe one person will go in and take down that shield, and then the rest of the team will go in and soak all of their damage into it instead of everyone popping their focuses for a shielded Guardian.
Yeah, for sure.
And, I mean, even going along with all those different things, we do see that sort of shield on people like Gnosis now, I've noticed, or on Vidasi when she ults. People are seeing the health shield animation as well, or I've noticed it a couple of times. The health shield animation is there.
That animation is so simple, but it's actually
it is gorgeous.
It's really good. It's really pretty. Just your shining, shimmering blue bubble that just surrounds you. Just I'm immune to damage. That's It's such a simple little thing that is actually really, really cool.
Yeah. And that goes beautifully into all
though on something.
Okay.
It says if you use a leap skill, you can't be immobilized in midair. That makes complete sense, from a design and matter of fact kind of state.
It makes sense if you take it for what it says. You can't be immobilized in midair. Hey, look, I have this momentum going, and so therefore, if I'm going to be hit by something that's going to stun me, I can't just haha, just drop midair.
But see, the thing is, it doesn't say you can't be interrupted. Because if you interrupt somebody in midair, that actually does stop them, and they will drop. If they can't be immobilized, what does that say about certain heroes that do have those immobilization skills, like Zenobia?
Really, I think that's more a direct nerf to Zenobia, because that was one thing a lot of people, especially I remember watching Teldo streams last week, he was up and down talking about how that, the Zenobia immobilization was just so broken against people like Trip and Taito. And I think that stopping immobilization midair is almost a direct nerf to everyone that has that. Even Vodin with his focus. Now he can't immobilize people that are flying across the map at him. He can't immobilize, all these people. And then, Zenobia can't immobilize anybody. Kador can't do it anymore. From Ageline can't do it. So I think anybody that has, I think that's just a direct nerf to immobilizations. But one thing you can note...
Ooh.
You've got a visitor, good sir.
Oh, goodness.
One thing you can note, though, is that I think it's a proportionate nerf because when you look at almost all of the immobilizations in the game right now, they're like 1.5 second immobilizes. They're incredibly long periods of time that you're just standing there because you were immobilized by something that, for the most part, is only mildly skill based. Like Ageling's immobilized is kind of skill based because it's a large AOE. You know, Vodin's is a focus, but it's a large AOE. There aren't too many but Zenobia's is just a home shot. You know, point and click. There it goes. Immobilize.
Yeah, and hers actually is the longest in the game, so that's kind of something that's why it's considered so strong. It's just because it's so easy to land. You just gotta look at them, and then it just flies.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a direct hit. There are times where I've had, because it kind of auto tracks. I've had times where I've shot it and I'm trying to hit this guy, and instead it veers over and hits someone to the right because it'll just kind of hit whoever is closest to kind of generally where you aim, which might not be exactly who you want, but yeah, I mean it's definitely a lot easier than a lot of the other immobilizes.
Yeah.
For a change like this, I usually favor the one that lets people express their own individuality and skill a little bit more. Obviously, you guys have noticed probably that I say that a lot, but I think it's really important for people to have fun at a competitive level is to feel like their skill is being reflected in the best way. So for a change like this, I sort of like it and I sort of don't. So for big AoEs and stuff like that, I'm fine with this. I like that you can't be immobilized in midair for that sort of stuff, or homing abilities like the Zenobia we were talking about. But if it's something like you landed H2 or HK's rail or something like that, I think those should be rewarded. And it is an interrupt, so I think it'll still
be
up them in midair. But it's just sort of the general trend that I prefer is to make sure that the higher skilled abilities have more opportunity to do more things if you can land them correctly.
Yeah, and even then there are some that aren't necessarily as as skill based, like Mozu's interrupt. Is still let me point and click and boom, you're interrupted. And I have noticed that I had a Taito leaping at me and I interrupted him midair and he just dropped right on down as he was swooping. So I think it is a fine balance, but I agree with what you're saying. If you have something that's competitive, if you have something that is more skill-based, you should be rewarded for being a skillful player. You should have that sense of reward.
Yeah, and kind of giving it to everyone who has an AoE or an auto tracking ability like the Zenobia or the Mozo. It sort of just takes away from the people who can hit it with the really weird skills.
Yeah, and moving right along through our patches, we're going right into our creature features, which will help very much with the future. You look at our bloomers now; they do so much more than they used to when you're fighting on it.
I love these changes to bloomers. I feel like they're going to be so much more useful, so much more.
Oh my god, yes! And I mean,
and
bloomers were already incredibly useful before Iron Places.
So good.
Oh, let me just fall back here and heal up. But now it's, let me actually fight on this. But I feel like it's a little bit overbalanced. I say it's a little bit too much because, baby bloomers now directly heal allies in fight. Okay, whatever. They launch two homing projectiles that heal for 75 each. Okay, fine. 2 homing projectiles, whatever. But it's the beam. They channel a healing beam that will heal them 100 seconds or 100 per second for 5 seconds. That's a 500 health heal over 5 seconds. That's plus you can stand on top of their healing pool and gain another 50 health per second. So that's 150 health per second that you are for 5 seconds. You can easily fight off an assassin inside of. No problem. And adult bloomers that have the single homing projectile for 300, that's like jaws of death to life right there. And then the healing beam for 150 per second for if you are standing on top of their central pool, 250 per second. It becomes almost impossible in a 1v1 scenario to fight on bloomers. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It definitely facilitates proper grouping and pushing objectives as a team.
Yeah, I think the big thing with bloomers is bloomers are the balance is they're really strong, but bloomers have Bloomers are a strong defensive summon, but at the same time, Bloomers have always been really easy to kill. Like, concerted fire from 2 people can take down even a large Bloomer in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
Compared to something like a Drake, where you could have an entire team beating on a Drake and it'll take 5-10 seconds to take down an adult stage. So I think it's balanced out, right? It's really, really hard to, kill people next to it, but if you just focus down the Bloomer first, meh.
Yeah, and that is something that's useful because before, and I still see it now, but before, a lot of what would happen is when people fight on enemy points, you'll see like the group up on the top, the ranged people, that maybe one of is attacking the Guardian, but 2 of them are helping the melees fight the enemy team over here. So it's like, what's going on? Why aren't we fighting the thing that's healing them? And now it's a very noticeable thing, like, oh my gosh, we need to kill this Bloomer right now. This is the whole reason we're here. Let's kill the Bloomer now so we can win this fight and snowball it to the next creature.
Yeah.
I think I'd prefer this if the beam happened only on the adults instead of just the babies, because right now it, for the most part, ends up discouraging fights, discouraging teams from pushing in if they know that there's a Bloomer on the other side, which is not something you want for just high intensity, quick gameplay. But I do want it to stay on the adult Bloomers so that it gives you more of a reward for actually upgrading it. Because if you try to upgrade a Bloomer right now, it's probably going to die really, really quickly after just one push or one team fight. And there's not enough benefit to actually putting it up in order for it to warrant that. But if you differentiate the baby Bloomer from that one, it becomes a huge difference. And not only that, but you also get a little bit of a normalization in the little Bloomers, just power in general. So now it's not just, oh, we'll always put one right here and we'll always know that we're safe, we can fall back to it and they won't push into us. You sort of have to take that risk to upgrade it and give it that vulnerable phase in order to have the really solid point that you can fall back to and fight on.
Yeah, and I really like that that's something that's supposed to happen because, I've said this before, I've said this many, many times, like, killing baby creatures, it makes sense that it's easy because they're babies. They are little tiny creatures that shouldn't require more than one person just to kill as quickly as possible. Adult creatures, like, these cost focus points. Like, sure, it's only 1 for an adult Bloomer, 2 for the autumn one, but, only get 1 of them per character if that hero even has a Bloomer summon, which they should. But like, you only get 1 of them. It doesn't have a lot of health or defense, and like 9 out of 10 times it's always at the forward point, which is closest to the enemy. Like, these adult creatures always should have felt like they were something that was valuable to capture for the enemy team. It was something that was valuable to capture and fight against, like, as an actual team instead of a 1v1 situation that could, like, a good, like, not even good, like a standard Taito player could just kind of hold right mouse button or hold left mouse button and kind of strafe to the side as they just kept swinging, and it would kill it because the branch moves so slowly. Or, like, any character really could do that, just
Pretty
given
much.
enough time. It's just, I feel like this is something that makes it more worth defending.
Well, and it makes it more capable of defending, because I like the idea that, like, the Bloomer isn't its own defense. The Bloomer is defensive because you can't kill anyone else next to it while it's up.
Yeah, and that's I think is the hallmark of the Bloomer. I think it should be something that should be easy to kill on its own, but not that easy to kill with other people around. But with the Bloomer changes being what they are, they're being a lot more useful. And with the Cyclops changes being what they are, they're much more difficult to avoid melee attacks. They can perform a leap at a longer range. The walls should pop in and out much less frequently. Those are much stronger now and much more difficult to just backcap. Kind of makes the Cerberus seem a little bit weak to me. I feel like there's almost no reason to get a Cerb nowadays.
The Cerberus has been weak for a long time.
It has, but like
Vision
this
is
is
so powerful.
Vision is, but the problem is on a map like this, seeing somebody walking behind your team is not necessarily difficult to do. I think they would be stronger on, the Mistforge map that they showed a long time ago and we haven't seen. But, it's this weird sense of, like, on this map, why would you utilize the Cerberuses when anybody walking behind your teams, even if they're not actually attacking the enemy creatures or your back creatures, you're going to see that exclamation point on the mini-map. It's going to be there for maybe one or two, little pop-ups on the mini-map. So you can see somebody's back there. They're doing something, and that's just enough of a call sign, exactly, for you to get there quickly enough and stop it, especially with a Cerberus back there, a Cyclops back there, which is harder to kill now than it was before. It's very easy to just quick rotate and deal with the problem. I mean, Drakes maybe not so much. I would say Drakes are a little bit weak on the young side and just aren't worth it enough compared to somebody like putting like a Yeti Cyclops up or a Mountain Cyclops in the back lines. So I guess right now it's really a toss-up of, do you want to still keep the Cerberus on your roster, or do you want to just have the Fire Drake there for a rainy day?
Yeah.
One thing about the Cerberus that we use in one of the reasons we end up using it a good deal is basically when the push actually happens, we can tell where they're coming from beforehand without having to station one person everywhere, because when we set up for a defense, we have to make sure that we're in good positions to defend, and those positions generally aren't the same positions that are the best to gather information. So sometimes it's good to have the Cerberus to tell where the enemy group is coming from as far in advance as possible. When you're just playing pubs and stuff like that, I don't think it'll be too useful, considering the enemy probably won't make a really coordinated push for the wound. But in scrims and stuff like that, that's where its use sort of comes from. I'm not entirely one way or the other on whether it's a necessity or not, though.
Yeah. It just feels to me like maybe like even the adult Cerberuses now, where they don't shoot the spread of fireballs and just shoot them in a straight line 3 at once, kind of, at least to my mind, really weakens them, because those are still easy to dodge now. The one thing that was really difficult to kill, they were difficult to kill before, was because you really couldn't dodge the fireballs before at the spread. I mean, unless you were far enough away from them, but for a melee, it was very difficult for you to go ahead and backcap them, and now it's just like, okay, let me just, again, like Wolfie was saying, hold left mouse button and strafe around. That's really all I have to do. And the charge, it's pretty solid, but even then, it's telegraphed a little bit easily. You can see them stop any other animations and prep for the charge for like a half a second, which is enough for you to quickly hit your dodge button and dodge out of the side of it. So it's almost feels to me as though they're not strong enough to be viable in, like Azrael was saying, in a solo queue environment. In a competitive, though, that's a great point. Being able to see where the enemy is pushing for the wound from is incredibly important. And having them for that is great.
It's because you're also dealing, in a competitive environment, you're dealing with a team that is organized and is communicating. Right now, without, chat, without most people, for the most part, you're not going to be on voice comms with anyone else that you're in queue with. You're not going to make complicated, like, 2 of us go over here, 3 of us go over there plays. Right now, it's pretty much just death ball, like, our 5-man team is going to run into your 5-man team, and someone's going to win.
Yeah.
Or what we saw a lot at PAX, though, was like when you're looking at like more competitive games where there was 5-man teams all on voice comms, with or without a coach, is you saw a lot of games where it was, okay, we're going to feint over here, get you to roll over to that point to try to defend it, and then we're actually going to be sending 3-4 people over there, and that's the times we're having vision to be like, there's 3 people over on that point and only 2 people over here. We can divide our people appropriately because we know where all of their team is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that'll be something to deal with in the future, as they do add voice comms into the base game and do add a chat system and by extension a party system and all this sort of stuff. That will be an interesting change to see, especially if ranked play becomes a thing eventually. We'll see, what becomes, because arguably there's not really a meta in a solo queue environment right now. There's the things people like to play and the kind of comp styles that are a little bit stronger, but even then, a standard meta for coordinated play just doesn't exist in solo queue because of all of that.
Yeah. there's just a lot to balance and a lot of different senses. Like, with these Cyclops walls and things, like, where do these walls summon on these specific points? And then, like, the Cyclops themselves, how much health do they have? How much defense do they have?
Yeah, but
Like
I think
it's
even
like
in a
having
solo
their own
queue,
little it's like
environment,
having
that's
their
not
own
like a
little
huge
hero
deal.
balance.
Yeah, but I mean, like in a solo queue environment, even then, I don't think people are really caring too much about that because for Cyclops, where's the wall going to pop up? That takes maybe 1 or 2 games really to see exactly where all of the walls pop up. Because they are just prevalent right now. And
Oh no,
even then,
I'm
like,
just saying, like, in a general sense of, like, this is stuff that Moti has to think about, like,
I guess.
for down the road competitive, like, you know, what exactly do all these things, like, what exactly are we trying to make all these things do? And with, different Cyclopses and Bloomers coming out now, like, how are we going to differentiate these? Why? What do they do? Like,
and they've done a beautiful job with that so far.
they have,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping that it'll stay like that. But I don't want some creatures to fall out of favor just because they don't seem as powerful, just kind of on the surface.
And even then, we don't want to see certain hero or creatures being chosen every single, game at these specific points simply because there's no reason to put anything else there, which has been the problem with Bloomer for a while. Why would you put anything other than Bloomer at Vista or Intake? Why would you do that? And that, I think, is a problem because there should be a sense of creativity there. I mean, from a competitive standpoint, yeah, there should be things that are generally accepted, but there should still be that kind of variety that's capable. Like, it should be changeable depending on your team strategy, because that's fun to watch. I mean, remembering back to League Season 2, when they were like, oh, by the way, we're now swapping lanes. Let's have bot lane in the mid lane, and everyone ate that up. They're like, whoa, we haven't seen that before. I mean, that just happened at the end of the season. I want to see things like that in a competitive scene. I like that, because that gives a nice little flavor.
I think the problem with that, though, is you look at a setup similar to that, and right now the reason we don't see that as much at Gigantic is because there are 16 heroes and 4 summons. Well, 6 summons now. That's not a lot, especially when you compare it to something like League of Legends. We got to the point where you could put your bot lane in the mid lane around the time there were 95 heroes and 100 and some odd items. There's a vast gulf of difference in meta where, like, League, yeah, sure, you can see some weirdness in meta because there's an inordinate number of options. Like Gigantic right now, you're picking 3 summons out of a pool of 6. Everyone has half of the summons carried with them at all times. So yeah, there is going to be a definitive best option most of the time. That'll probably change as the game develops.
And as there's more stuff thrown in the bag.
It's a bit early to complain about the meta being
stale,
relatively locked down when there's just like it's not stale. We just don't have options yet.
Yeah. Speaking of changes to the meta and play style, huge changes came out to a couple of our lovely heroes. Aisling in specific got a couple of different changes that on the surface seem like, oh wow, they really changed her, but to me doesn't feel like she's changed that much playstyle wise.
I want to hear what Azaraki thinks about new Aisling, honestly, because I think she's really different. I feel like she's kind of gotten thrown in a strange direction of where she used to be kind of like this off-tanky support kind of thing. At least that's how I always played her. And now she's like so offensive with this new kind of thing going down. So I don't know, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't really play too much Aisling before or after the changes, so I don't have too much of my own opinion, but I think one of the main goals was to make her much more reliant on Khador in general and managing him rather than sort of throw it out and forget about it, and you still have a pretty good fighting skill on your own. So it's interesting how that works. In terms of whether or not it's better or worse, I'm not entirely sure. I might have to end up asking Blanky, who is our big support player who plays Aisling, Zenobia, and those heroes quite a bit. But I'm not too sure myself. Aisling was one of the heroes that I generally stayed away from.
Yeah, I know, like, thinking back to PAX, like, the little bit I saw Blanky play on Aisling, it was much more as, like, kind of... you're almost playing her as I'm going to stand back over here and control the battlefield by moving Kador around. And it seems like that would, if anything, be accentuated by now having essentially 3 abilities that move Kador around instead of just 2. You've got a little more of it is much more of a you are Aisling, but Kador is your weapon more than before, where it was kind of a like we're both fighting together kind of style.
Yeah, and really, I think emphasizes that style of play, like with the change to Spectral Wave now replacing your melee attack with the projectile. Really actually kind of means she can choose to either be that person who gets in the fight and brawls, or if she does this, she can go into that projectile. She can kind of sit back, kind of like an Orianna style play, just kind of sit back herself, throw some projectiles in, but let Kador do most of the work, which really actually puts her into this kind of support niche. It lumps her in with Vidasi and Zenobia as this kind of utility support rather than a brawler or a damage carry, or even just like a debuff support.
Yeah, but her utility has kind of always been there, honestly. It's more one of those things where like a lot of I feel like a lot of damage has been added to Kador that doesn't really make any kind of sense. I mean, yeah, he's more durable and like he can get in there, and he's supposed to. Like I don't mind that, but it just kind of makes him feel like they're 2 characters in one hero now, because you can kind of summon him and he gets his own damage buff with right mouse button, that upgrade that lets him do an attack. And then Warcry is like almost instantaneous now, and it's around him. And just like it's an interrupt, it can slow, it can immobilize. There's just a lot that both of them can do now, and it makes it actually feel like she's almost becoming as a fighter, like not really like a what was I saying? It feels like she's becoming more of this heavy hit brawler
rather than like a support hero,
not someone who's actually like supposed to actually debuff and like suppress people. That's how I always played her, and it's really hard to do that with these changes now, just because everything seems to be more focused on offense instead of like actually utility.
I could see some of that changing though. Because it seems like a lot of this, from reading over it, I never played Aisling that much, so I can't really comment how much on the fact that it changed. But like, it seems like a lot of these are quality of life improvements. Like a couple things, like every time I've played Aisling, I've always felt like I just couldn't get anything to happen the way I wanted them to, or it'd be like, I want Connor to go over there. Like click ability, 3, 2, 1. Oh, now he's moving. 3, 2. Oh, there he's finally gotten there. It's just like it felt like I was playing with weights because everything took so long to happen. And sure, maybe you adjust to that after you get used to playing her. But, it seems like a lot of this is, oh, good, like, abilities actually happen when I tell them to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want it to be put on the record that I don't dislike the changes. I don't like that I feel like she's being pushed into this different, like,
a
role
more
that she's
brawler
not
role
supposed to be. Yeah.
But, I mean, to be fair, she had that before. Like, speaking at least my playstyle of Aisling before, I only used Kador for his utility. I would drop him out with his Q to immobilize or stun or whatever, and then I would immediately grab him back into my sword so I can get the damage boost and just attack as many people as possible. I didn't use Kador, in a utility sense or a damage sense. He was just kind of there. I used him to buff me, and that was it. So, he was always there. Like, there were people who played him that style, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, she's moved into that more, or that the other side wasn't more prevalent. I would say that, yeah, the support utility side was more prevalent of a play style for Aisling, just because it was a little bit stronger. It wasn't pub stompy. It actually had some sense of strategy to it, which was fun.
That said, speaking of Blanky and Synergy and what other things, since we've got Azaraki here, I would love to like actually mention Synergy, wonderful team. They are part of the forefront of like starting up a competitive scene in Gigantic. Where do we feel like that's going? I mean, we keep talking about competitive meta and like games at PAX and whatever. But like with this week, with all of esports kind of going crazy, League of Legends Worlds, Here the Storm going on. Rematch GG started up this week. Local, like essentially a bunch of gigantic coaches, gigantic community members running their own competitive tournament site. How do we feel about that?
I think it's really good. I like the fact that the community is taking the first step in harboring the competitive scene for Gigantic, and that's really the most natural way to do it, and it's the one that creates the most longevity. So with a system like that, there's not going to be a lot of money that's just straight up pumped into it or anything like that, so it's not going to blow up overnight, but the foundations are going to be a lot more stable with a system like this. So I really like that the community, especially Rematch, is taking the first step in helping the competitive scene. And Motiga, they're already doing their job as well, just by giving them support, by creating a game and balancing well for competitive. And that's all they really need to do. They don't need to host $100,000 tournaments.
Or seasons.
Or seasons, yeah.
But, I personally, I love the fact that, with Rematch GG being what it is, being a grassroots community based around having this kind of community-based competitive scene rather than, a corporate or developer-based, is I guess one way to look at it, competitive scene, is very, very good for the overall longevity of a competitive scene, because that means that the people who are going to show up are the people who are invested. The people who are going to be the big names are the ones that are legitimately trying their best to make a change in the community and make this competitive scene work. Because if it's just dev funded and they're like, oh, by the way, we're going to throw $3,000 into this next tournament, whatever, a lot of people are going to pop in. They're going to say, yeah, I want to win, $2,000 grand prize. I'll do that. And so anybody and everybody is going to come out of the woodwork. But if it's a grassroots MMR system base where the prizes are, bragging rights in most of the cases, that really facilitates a healthy competitive community that can transition into a for money, for solid prizes competitive scene.
And
I think
Infinite Crisis is a good example too. They definitely rushed their competitive scene there, and at the beginning their game wasn't too good, but they definitely fixed a lot of the usability errors and the feedback for their game. So by all means, towards the end of the game, it wasn't a bad game, and that's not really the reason it died. But like, the big thing is that they forced so much money into it. Like, here's $10,000 tournament before we even hit beta, or like as we launch beta and stuff like that. They're trying to get front page of Twitch all the time, go for huge tournaments at every PAX. A bunch of people came in to play the game, a bunch of pros, and they were just in it for the money. As soon as the money stopped coming in, they just completely dropped and ditched. And that's what you end up with if you just try to throw money at it. You get a bunch of people who are there for the money, who don't care about the game whatsoever, and just drop it at the sign of any danger.
Yeah.
There's one thing I also like about what we formed as a competitive community. Like, I spent a lot of time on the rematch game box, and like, of course some people have like little like it's all kind of playful banter, honestly, but these people that we like hang, like these people that talk to each other and actually scrim against each other, like they are actually friends with each other, and that's something that's really cool. Just to like there's no like immortal kind of enemy. There's like not really a lot of back talking and like talking down. That's, well, I mean, there is sometimes, but it's not anything that's like
But
really
it's to be
serious.
expected,
Yeah. And it's just like it's just cool that these guys actually do like each other and want to actually like spend time, and not just like smashing each other in Gigantic. Like, they just want to play like other games like CS:GO or Diablo or something. And like I think that it's really cool. It just kind of like promotes this kind of healthy kind of thing that we're going for. Or just
really
like
feels like a community.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it doesn't feel like we're all at each other's throats trying to be the best team in the entire world.
Well, I think kind of the interesting thing, and we've been saying this recently, is there's a lot of the older games in kind of the first wave of esports. You know, obviously, like there's like kind of the legacy esports, like, you know, CS:GO and StarCraft that have been around forever, but like kind of the modern esports set of games that like either tried to start up and get into the esports scene and failed, like, you know, your Infinite Crisis, your, you know, Han, some of that kind of stuff, and the ones
Strife.
that made it, those
Strife.
yeah.
Oh god.
Well, a lot of those, like, they try to make it in, but I think, like, now that we're kind of already in the position where, like, we have our monolithic esports, we have our internationals, our, you know, League of Legends Worlds, you know, we've got our monolithic esports that are kind of already out there, and now that there's, like, all these coming up, it seems like the one that's almost done the best in coming out of nothing that, you know, isn't a weird, like, I don't know if I count Heroes of the Storm just because Blizzard's behind it, and Blizzard can throw enough money to make anything an esport if they try hard enough.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And their fan base too. Like the
Yeah.
Blizzard fans are crazy. They'll take it. Like Hearthstone is a really good example. Blizzard came out and was like, "Yeah, we don't want Hearthstone to be competitive. We're not going to fund tournaments. We're not going to give you a spec mode." And then like so many people wanted Hearthstone to be a competitive thing that eventually Blizzard caved.
Yeah. I mean, and
Yeah.
the fan base has kind of always really been ravenous for Blizzard stuff ever since, you know, World of Warcraft. I mean, my brother is a die-hard World of Warcraft player, you know, one of the bigger members of the Shaman community. So I know exactly what that is like when it comes to ravenous Blizzard friends, or fans. But, like, really, I would say that the model, like Noirba was saying, the model for an up-and-coming competitive circuit is very well perpetrated by HOTS. I mean, continue with what you were saying.
I don't know though, because I think like Heroes of the Storm is still at the position where it's being forced by Blizzard, right? I think the model that's actually been working out well, and I think what's going to happen with Motiga, because it doesn't have, you know, this massive backing behind it already, is Rocket League. You know, Rocket League is one of those games where it kind of, you know, it came up, a lot of people liked it, it had some early following, but now there's ESL Rocket League with like actual casters and an MLG Rocket League tournament that happen on a weekly basis. You know, there's decent cash prizes for each of them. They're running pretty well. And like, you know, this is one of those things where it's like, my roommate watches a ton of Twitch streams, and literally like a month and a half ago, I was hearing a guy, one of the people he was watching a stream from, was literally went on a 30-minute rant about why Rocket League will never be an esport and why it's, you know, horrible and awful, and will they stop trying to make it esport. And like, I have friends who are playing in the ESL Rocket League tournament. They're just like people I work with, and like for actual money, and they're practicing. And I think that's what like I could see happening with Motiga.
I had no idea this existed. Not even going to lie. I didn't even know Rocket League.
Rocket League is
was
such a good game.
Like, I knew it was a great game.
It really is.
I had no idea that competitive Rocket League was a thing, though. But
Yeah, there's
that's
a
really
couple-
cool.
Well, and it's not a deep scene. Like, there was a team that essentially won, like, every tournament for the first, like, 3 or 4 weeks. But, like, now there's competition, because it's one of those, like, once you crowned the champion once, it's like, now you've got a couple teams that came along and were like, no, we're gonna beat Kurnobi. We're gonna do it. Like, we are gonna train all day and night to beat that one team. And so now there's, like, actually, like, 2 or 3 competitive teams. And, like, it's building out the community, and it's gonna be really good.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
almost say that we're
that's
going to
actually
probably
something
have
that-
that.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's already started to happen, just because of the fact that at PAX Prime, you know, Synergy actually did beat Clashpoint at that scrim when it was first. Am I wrong when I said that? No,
Yeah, I like to call it even between us and Clashpoint personally, because the first game we won really convincingly. They didn't get a wound on us, and then the 2 games we lost were really close. So if you look at like wound KDA or something like that, it ends up being pretty even. So we're definitely in really good competition with each other.
Yeah, but that's all I'm really saying, though. It's just like, you know, these teams are actually doing really well against people that have been here for like ever, and like that just kind of promotes that kind of own.
Well, and it's not like
their own thing.
That's not like to say that, you know, Synergy hasn't been around for a while. They have. They very much
I know
have.
they have.
But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with, you know, people like Team Apex, who's just now kind of showcasing themselves off on the scene. You know, they made the post up on Reddit. They've got their Twitter going on. It's going to be interesting to see how they splurge into the scene, because, I mean, how long has it been since there's been another team in the competitive scene that has actually stayed for a while? I mean, speaking as the former captain of Team Tiny, the death of a team is very quick in this competitive scene, or at least from what I've seen. But
Well,
Apex
and
is
even
here.
you look back at like PAX East, we had One Tap and Warpath, and One Tap is gone, and Warpath is pretty like they're maybe you have 2 people from the team for PAX East are
Lying
still
out
on
the
team.
window. So-
Not that they're not a good team anymore, but like we've had teams form and reform pretty regularly. Synergy and Clashpoint have been consistent, but still.
Yeah, and I think it's
to
going to be
expected this early.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly where the scene goes. What new teams pop up? Is it really just going to be, okay, this mixed bag of people, it's 6 people, who's going to beat Clashpoint and Synergy this week? Or is it going to be, who's going to come out on top? We've got 8 teams here, and let's see who's going to make it, And that's what I want to see more than anything, but we don't know. We really don't know.
Yeah,
can only hope.
Definitely.
As time goes on, teams will definitely be a lot more solid. People are screaming in the background as well. Don't mind that.
That's fine.
But for the most part, right now, teams are just feeling things out. Like, first of all, nobody, like the game itself, the players who've been in it the longest have been here for a year and a couple of months at most. So it's definitely. Relationships still need to be formed between people in order for teams to work, and most teams don't work on the first iteration anyway. Even with like newer or even with the most popular esports, you just don't hear about it because the teams that are up there have been practicing with each other for like 2 or 3 months before they actually
Say
show
anything.
up and people have heard of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're just going to talk about a few quick last points before we wrap it up here for today. We've almost coming up to that 1 hour point. Hero balance, quick little things. Trip did get some nerfs. The damage output she did, because that was one of the things we were talking about last week, was Trip feels kind of really strong. Got a couple of nerfs. They've reduced her damage slightly, shortened the overall combo, and put an extra pause at the end of the combo. Added a little half-second pause after Blade Storm. The Power Surge upgrade actually means you have to be, an assassin to actually get that. These are all, in my opinion, feel changes. I mean, there's the one change, it's like we've reduced the damage slightly that she does. But everything else is all feel. It's play style. It's actually making it more difficult for Trip to do what she needs to do. And it's not just a flat, she's too strong, get rid of all of her numbers nerf. It's a separate the men from the boys sort of a thing. Let's separate Teldo and, Germs and Quick from Joe Schmo over here.
Well, and I think it's a matter of we saw in talking to some of the balance people back in earlier PAXs. They're saying like our philosophy is we're going to do wild swings in balance. We're going to do really drastic things, kind of like what we saw with Ashling in this patch, where we're going to take like everyone's numbers and just like let's just double everything and see what happens. And that is a philosophy that they're running with as far as balance. But I think now that we're seeing it more in the public, we are starting to see those smaller swings. Like they're saying, it's like a pendulum, right? Like we're going to try, let's see what's too overpowered. Now let's see what's too underpowered. And then, like, let's slowly bring this back to a medium that actually is in a good position by balance testing and then bring it back in. And I think, with Trip, someone that's been around for a real long time, we're starting to see her fall into a more comfortable spot. And for some of the newer characters like Ashling and Griselda, we're probably still going to be seeing some of those wild swings.
Yeah, and, Valentine asks a good question. People think Wu is OP right now. Wu got the changes where they've actually kind of buff-nerfed him. It's a mixed bag, They reduced the extra damage coming from Flowing Fist, but they added some more kind of works between him. I think they made him more of a combo-based hero, and he already was before, that was his thing, but they've now added some more synergy with that. They've actually said, hey, look, if you can pull off the combo and land everything, you should be rewarded heavily for that.
Yeah,
especially because against players who have a better idea of how to play against Wu, you're really going to have to watch out in terms of how you pick your fights and where your positioning is, because he's got a lot of lockdown. In a 1v1, Wu's probably going to kill you, and you might have to accept that, but at the same time, it's up to the Wu to make sure he finds the right engagement, because if his opponents are saving their CC for him and they manage to him away from his target and interrupt the combo in any way, then he's really vulnerable. So there's a decent amount of counterplay, and as a Wu player, you need to make sure that you position yourself well and pick the right fights. It's probably more important with Wu to pick good fights than any other hero right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
He's got an interesting place, honestly. I personally think that he just does a lot of damage. I mean, yeah, you can disrupt him, and it relies on a lot of hit combos. But you know, when you actually do get those combos off, like, you do a lot of damage, and it's a little. I think it's a little.
Maybe too much?
A little, maybe just a tad above par that it needs to be. I don't know. It's hard to really tell because this patch only came out like 2 days ago.
And we've
Yeah,
only
right.
been able to play it since yesterday.
Yeah, it's like 24 hours of playtime is the most anyone's had at this point.
Yeah, and I would like to end a little bit on Imani, because we talked about her last week. You know, felt a little bit weak. She did get some changes. They adjusted the sniping damage as in the 2x and 3x multipliers for Silent Scope, so that's now accurate. And they rearranged the upgrades a little bit. But honestly, I just don't feel like there's too much of a change to it, and it kind of goes along with what we were saying. Imani is castrated by the map. She's very much, limited to what she can do, basically because there just aren't enough solid sight lines that Imani could just sit in one spot and do her job with.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, she'll be better as soon as we get a different map and that has a little more space on it. But until then, she's gonna be relatively sedate. She'll be a niche pick for people that are really, really good with her, and we'll go from there.
And I mean, she has had some buffs, though. She has had those things that allow her, like, if she can actually get the shots off, it's huge. Like, the Vital Organs upgrade makes it so your scope shots have 50% armor pen. That's huge. Yeah. That is monstrous.
And that solves the problem that she had before, which was all of her stuff, like all of her primary damage was crits. And so if you took Stonewall, which was the passive that lets you ignore crits, she was worthless. So that'll finally help. And I mean, it'll mean that if you're coming over from CS:GO and you've got MLG Pro 360 no scope skills, you'll be fine on her. And there's some people that are in that boat, and they're still going to be Imani's going to be a good pick for them, because in many ways she is the character with the most transferable FPS skills.
Yeah. I mean, at least for right now, we don't know, in the future they may come out with a dude that walks around with a minigun, or just somebody that walks around with an assault rifle. We don't know. And that'll be interesting to see, in the future.
In terms of Imani, the thing that really makes Imani right now is the boom bolts and the burning on boom bolts. It does a ton of damage. You can do it in an AoE as well, and it does too much damage in my opinion. I think that could be scaled down. I'd like to see everything shifted around a bit to make sure that actually sniping is her main focus, rather than landing the boom bolts and just getting a burn, because on top of it, it is an AoE. You can burn people with it and hit people with it without actually hitting them straight on, which is sort of weird and takes away from the actual skills. So I'd like to see that toned down a little bit.
Kind of brought in line.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting. One last comment, Valentine saying, doesn't AHK have a minigun? Isn't he more of an FPS kind of transferable character? And I would agree to an extent, but considering that's the only thing on his kit that necessarily feels familiar from other FPS games, I'd say he's more ability-based and he has a different overarching playstyle.
Well, I think the other thing is Gigantic is a third-person shooter. So if if you're coming over from a first-person shooter, something like HK isn't necessarily going to play the same way. He's also not a precision fighter. If you've got CS:GO experience, you're not used to I've got a minigun. You're used to precision shots, like let's get straight headshots. And Imani, if she's scoped in, it's exactly the same as if you're playing sniper in CS:GO, pretty much.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. All right, but we are going to be heading off here pretty soon here. Thank you so much for popping on by, Azrak. Is there anything left that you want to say before we head on out?
I definitely want to shout out my Twitter, which is just at Azaraki Dragon. Same spelling as you see on the screen.
Yep.
Oh,
and
wait, it's right there.
Right below.
Wow.
Yep, right off to the side. I
was
brought you in
looking
there.
at everything but the left side of the overlay, so I didn't even see.
Well, now I know.
See?
But yeah, we have all of
See?
our Twitters there on the side, so if you want to follow Azaraki, he is there. Please also remember to follow us as well. You could also follow us at GG Unleashed for the full Gigantic Unleashed community and all of the things that we'll be doing over there. Feel free to stick around, as we will be probably hosting. I don't think anybody from GG Unleashed is going to stream immediately following, so we're going to go ahead, do a little bit of a raid, and help out a good friend within the community. We've got Equinox Fox is currently streaming with only 7 viewers, and that's just not right. So we should go ahead and head on over to Equinox Fox's stream, hit him up, say hi, say the Bull Rush is rushing on over, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, GG Unleashed. Looking forward to the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely.